What's up, everybody? How we doing today? We had football yesterday. We are so back, baby. Pads, touchdowns, flags, field goals, the whole deal. It's back, baby. I mean, it did get none of the starters played. It got rained out in the third quarter, but still, football nonetheless. Me, I'm a little bit sick right now, but dude, it's football time. We got to talk ball. So I'm hanging out today. If this was February, maybe we don't do a show today, but right now, crunch time, August, draft time, we got to do a show. We got to do a show. And today, very important show. People like the breakouts. They like the sleepers. They like the Sam Laportas and the Kyle Pitts of the world. But we also got to hit on the fades. We got to hit on the guys that we're not touching with a 10-foot pole, or at least we're not taking anywhere around ADP. There are times where some of these guys I'm going to talk about today that might slide a little bit. And we say, okay, you know what? Enough is enough. I'll take them. And there's a couple of these guys that I'm going to talk about where I have drafted. But for the most part, when I talk about fades, I'm thinking about my big hometown league. That's the big thing for me. I do play a lot of high stakes and stuff like that, but for me, my most important league will always be my hometown league with all the pride and now at this stage a good amount of money on it. But that's where we're at, right? That's where we're at. I'm thinking about it that way. Who we're fading, who we're not. And I actually just updated my dynamic tier rankings in the Fantasy Alarm draft guide. I'm updating everything this week. By the start of next week, it'll all be done. Everything. We're doing the dynamic tier. We're doing the PPR, half PPR, full PPR, the dynasty rankings, and the best ball rankings. It's all getting updated because it's August, man. It's time to rock and roll. So we're gonna make sure that's all done. What I did with a dynamic tier is I updated the rankings and I also go through and I color code them. And essentially what I do is I take all the players and I put them, in the general order of how I feel they should go, also sorted by upside. And then I'll go in and I'll color code them. Green are guys that we're taking above ADP. Yellow are guys that if we get a good value around ADP, we will take them. And then red are guys we're not taking anywhere near ADP. This is just a quick look at last year, just so you see. Like I said, they're behind the paywall, but this is just a general idea. And again, this is from my spreadsheet, not from the guide. They clean it up, make it look all nicer. But see, you got a couple guys that are in red there that we're not taking. A lot of guys, it's like we're collecting value. So for the most part, it's like if we get a good value on some of these top guys, we'll take them, whatever it ends up being. And then green guys we're willing to reach on. That's essentially what it is. That's all available right now in the Fantasy Alarm draft guide. If you go and check that out, you can get a copy of the draft guide by itself. You can get a copy of the cheat sheet that has those rankings, or kind of the cheat code right now is get an all pro membership. If you use promo code Let's Go, you get 50% off the first month. That gives you the cheat sheet, it gives you the guide, it gives you everything, right? And it actually costs less than the guide itself. And right now, I mean, we're talking August 2nd, it takes you through August where all your drafts are. So if you decide you don't want to keep the membership, that's fine. You probably should though, because then you get all our DFS stuff. You get in the Discord, you get all access to everything we got. So check that out now. But without further ado, let's get into it. And again, not feeling super hot, but I'm fired up on football fumes. So we're gonna get through this. We'll probably do about a half hour or so. We did a half hour last week. I feel like that is a sweet spot for a solo show. So I'm not foaming at the mouth by the end of some of these shows like I have been in the past. So first, I'm gonna look at quarterback. Right, for me personally, and this might be offensive to people. Again, there's a lot of guys I'm going to talk about on here. I'm not making fun of your favorite team. I don't hate these guys. I don't like their ADP, and I don't like the way it fits into my strategy. That's the end. So first and foremost, let's get it going with quarterback, right? The top guy, Josh Allen in ADP, is a guy that I'm not drafting. I'm not drafting him there. That's the case for me. And one of the big reasons, before we even get into the player himself, one of the big reasons I'm not doing that is you don't know about the flow of your draft or your league until it gets going in most cases. I'll give you an example. The first mock draft we did this year, that's in the draft guide. You can check it out. It's got, Rich Rebar's in there, Jim Coventry, me, Howard Bender, a bunch of great analysts are in there, JJ Zacharyson. John Impemba took the first quarterback off the board, and he did so in like the third round, which is pretty reasonable. He took Jalen Hurts, and then nobody else took another quarterback for 3 more rounds. And Josh Allen went like in round 6. And then you look at that Jalen Hurts pick, and it's like, wow, you just bled a ton of value because you didn't work into the board. You didn't read the room, right? And that's a big thing for me at quarterback, and we'll talk about it at tight end as well. So for me, I'm not taking Josh Allen first. And the thing is, with both Josh Allen and Jalen Hurts, yes, they scored 15 rushing touchdowns last year. They're going to score rushing touchdowns this year, but are they going to score 15 again? Like Jalen Hurts, you know, Jason Kelsey's gone. The tush push might not be as effective. They got Saquon Barkley. But Josh Allen, I mean, he just lost his top target, Stephon Diggs. We have to talk about the fact that this guy was getting 150 targets per year, essentially, for the last 4 years. And he was averaging nearly 70 first downs. Now, we like drafting Dalton Kincaid because we hope he can step up, but I don't think any of these guys are really ready to step in and be that guy right from the rip as a rookie. Maybe Keon Coleman can. But we've seen enough Curtis Samuel. We've seen enough Khalil Shakir. I worry with this Bills team that it's just going to be a good team, but not as good and as explosive on offense. And maybe it's not worth taking Josh Allen off the board as the first quarterback and maybe putting yourself in a position where you're the only guy that drafts one and now you're treading water and it sucks. So that's the first guy I'm really not taking. I'm not taking Josh Allen the first QB. If someone takes Jalen Hurts and he slides for like a while, like happened with Pemba, sure, I'll get in there. But I don't mind taking Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes, any of those guys that have upside. The next guy that I'm not really taking a lot of ADP, and this one hurts a lot of people's feelings, is CJ Stroud. I think CJ Stroud is awesome. I think he has a lot of awesome weapons. But in fantasy football, the guys with mobile upside simply have a higher ceiling than a guy like CJ Stroud. And he can run a little bit. I would say he is a mobile quarterback the way Patrick Mahomes is a mobile quarterback, but he's not a rushing quarterback. He doesn't run the way that Lamar Jackson or Jalen Hurts do. And for me, I look around and I would rather wait just a little bit and take Anthony Richardson or Kyler Murray. In a recent draft, I did the pros with Joe's. You can see that one up on FFPC. I posted it on Reddit earlier today. I actually did take CJ Stroud because people are very sharp. It was like John Daigle, and I'm name dropping a bunch of people, but they're sharp people in that league. And Anthony Richardson and Kyler Murray went before CJ Stroud. CJ Stroud fell long enough, and it was best ball where I ended up taking him. But for the most part, I'm not taking him as the QB. He goes like QB5, right? The other part is that I feel like there are players that have similar skill set and weapons and upside and floor going later, namely Jordan Love, right? Jordan Love was just as good in fantasy football last year as CJ Stroud, was he not? Like they, on a per game basis, pretty much the same. And his weapons are great. We love Jaden Reed and Christian Watson and Dontavian Wicks and Josh Jacobs and Romeo Dubs and all these guys, right? And Luke Musgrave and Tucker Kraft. I mean, they got a million of them, right? So we like this player. Why would I take CJ Stroud at pick 50 if I could wait and take Jordan Love at pick 70? Right. So for me, I'm just not doing a lot of CJ Stroud. And honestly, the same thing goes for the other guy I'm fading, which is Joe Burrow. And that one's tough because again, with all these guys, you can envision a monster season where they throw 50 touchdown passes and it's all incredible. And it's it's Peyton Manning and all these, Patrick Mahomes, 49, 50 touchdown passes. But you can see that for all these guys. I can see it for Patrick Mahomes. We can see the rushing upside for Hurts, Allen, Lamar Jackson. We can see the rushing upside for Anthony Richardson, Kyler Murray, Jaden Daniels. Dak Prescott was a QB3 last year, right? Brock Purdy has incredible weapons. Tua has Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, right? But Caleb Williams has an amazing set of weapons. Kirk Cousins. Like there's so many guys that could do that I just don't feel the need to take the ones going earliest. I would rather wait and take the other ones. That's just simply what it is. And again, the other thing with Joe Burrow, I worry about is this wrist situation. I mean, people that have had this injury have come out and said, "Hey, I had the same injury. My wrist did not feel good for a long time. Like this is a tough injury. It saps your ability a little bit, and I just want to see it. You know what I mean? It's like I just don't need to pay that premium. That's my feeling with it. So I'm not drafting a lot of Joe Burrow. Sorry. Another one I'm not drafting much of. I wouldn't necessarily call him a fade, but where he goes and with the players around him, I just don't take a lot of Brock Purdy. I just don't. I don't find myself taking Purdy. I think he's a. And again, I hate the like. I'm not going to be somebody that comes and says this guy sucks and he's a system quarterback. I think he is. I think it is a good system, and I think he is a good quarterback. I just don't think he needs to do all that much. That's the thing. Tom Brady, a lot of years, was not a good fantasy football quarterback because he didn't need to do a whole lot. They had great defenses and they had tons of weapons, and he was getting paid nothing early in his career. That's how they won 3 out of 4 Super Bowls because he was on a rookie contract, and that's what's happened with Purdy. He's making $1 million, and that's how you can have CMC and Ayuk and Debo and Hargrave and Bosa and literally everybody, right? And Trent Williams. So it's like I just when I get into that range, I look and I say, well, do I want Brock Purdy, who doesn't offer anything really in terms of rushing, and they don't need to throw very much. They were one of the teams that threw the fewest amount last year. Do I want that guy or do I want like Jaden Daniels, who ran the ball 186 times in college, right? Do I want Jordan Love, who could have his back against the ropes in a lot of these games? That's where I look at it is I say, do I need to pay the price for this player if I don't believe the ceiling is exciting? So that's another one. So far for fades, just a quick recap: Josh Allen, C.J. Stroud, Joe Burrow, Barack Purdy. We got a few more here. A couple I'm not drafting at ADP, and I'll group them together. Are Kirk Cousins and Aaron Rodgers. Again, these guys at this stage in their career. Once upon a time, Aaron Rodgers was a guy that was scrambling around and running the ball, and he was punching it in from like the 5 yard line out himself, and he was running kind of a high, fast paced offense. As of late, if you look at the numbers on Rodgers, he's incredibly efficient. He doesn't throw a lot of picks, but we don't care about picks in fantasy football. And he also runs a very slow paced offense. A lot of audibles, a lot of trying to get people to go offside so that he can do that, like, get you off sides and chuck it up for grabs. Like those type guys in a two quarterback league, the rules change. Of course, we want guys like that. But in a single QB league, I just don't know if I'm going to feel comfortable with Kirk Cousins or Aaron Rodgers in my lineup, knowing that they have to throw at an exceptional level to have those like all time seasons. In the modern NFL, you basically either need to be a rushing quarterback of some kind or you need to be able to throw 40 or 50 touchdowns. And only three guys have ever thrown 50. Peyton Manning and Tom Brady and Patrick Mahomes, right? So for me, I look at it and I'm like, I don't know if that's going to be the case for these guys. Like they got Bijan Robinson, they got Brees Hall. They don't need to do that. So not really drafting those guys. And the last one from that range that really kind of matters would be Justin Herbert. I mean, they want to do the ground and pound. They got rid of Keenan Allen and Mike Williams and Gerald Everett and Austin Eckler. And I look at that and I'm like, boy, that's everybody, right? And you know, they brought in a rookie lad McConkey. It's like Hayden Hurst and Quentin Johnson's dropping everything. All that I wasn't already drafting him, and then now we find out that Justin Herbert has plantar fasciitis. Man, that he might have to be faded in every format. Two QB leagues, super flex, best ball until that ADP comes down because plantar fasciitis that hurts. It physically hurts, and it doesn't go away quick. They said that he's going to be in a boot and he'll play. That's a pain tolerance injury, which is basically like, hey, let's just put you in a boot, limit the pain, and then on week one, you got to play football. Like that's the situation there. I don't love that. Other guys, just to wrap it up, because I don't want to go crazy. We probably will end up doing an hour. I said I was going to do a half hour. I just talked 15 minutes about quarterbacks. So whatever, dude. It's football, dude. We're back, baby. It's August. Let's go. Guys, I'm not drafting. Daniel Jones, not doing it. Just not. His only redeeming factor was mobile upside. He just tore his knee up. And they're already saying it looks terrible in camp. And then Drew Lock might even be the guy, right? I'm not drafting Sam Darnold. I worry that even again we're talking two QB guys, so it doesn't really matter. I just worry that he's not going to be the quarterback all year, and that he's not Kirk Cousins. People think he's going to be, or that Bo Nick, that JJ McCarthy's going to be. It's not happening. So I don't know. Justin Fields, I personally, and this is a personal belief, I think that Russell Wilson's going to start all year, and that this team that was a playoff team last year with Kenny Pickett and Mitch Trubisky could easily be a playoff team with Russell Wilson, who I think is pretty good. If you don't like Russell Wilson, then go ahead and draft Justin Fields. Just know you're just going to be sitting there watching Russell Wilson for many, many weeks. And then that's pretty much it. The rest of the guys I have fades are backups. So that's it for quarterback. Get that fantasy alarm draft guide now, and you can see all these guys, and you can see who we're taking above ADP. The guys highlighted in green. The yellow guys will take around where they're going. That group of guys, just not really taking them there. So on to the next one. Let's talk about fun positions. Let's talk about wide receiver now. Wide receiver. And again, with this position, I personally, compared to some of my other rankings, and this is built into the position, I don't have a lot of red guys, red names up towards the top. Like you look around in the first round and knowing the nature of wide receiver and how every team has two, maybe three on the field for the most part, like the entire game, except for the Falcons last year, we only had Drake London and then used a bunch of fullbacks and tight ends, and it was super weird. But for the most part, every team has like two of these guys on the field. They're less injury prone than running backs. It's not as linear of a depth chart. So like what happens at running back sometimes, and especially quarterback and tight end, you lose your job, you go to 0, right? Like at quarterback, you lose that job, your value goes from 100 to 0. At wide receiver, if you're the top wide receiver on the team and you all of a sudden become the second wide receiver on the team, still pretty good, right? Like Jalen Waddle was the top wide receiver on the Dolphins and became the second wide receiver, still awesome. So there's not a lot of red up towards the top of my rankings. You're like CeeDee Lamb, Tyreek Hill, Jamar Chase, AJ Brown, awesome. Amon-Ra St. Brown, Justin Jefferson. I mean, like for me, that's not a huge problem. One guy, I guess I'm not really drafting at ADP that I have to talk about that I do have red in the rankings would be Justin Jefferson. He's an incredible player, right? But we've seen incredible players have a hard time when they don't have a good quarterback, right? Like we've seen it many times. Evan Ingram was a top 5 tight end with Eli Manning. With Daniel Jones, not good. With Trevor Lawrence, back-to-back top 5 seasons. It happens, right? We watched Randy Moss go to the Raiders and be dog water. Then he went to the Patriots and he scored 23 touchdowns. So it's something you got to think about with Justin Jefferson. Yes, I do believe he's a top 10 guy, but do I think he can be wide receiver one? Yeah, he could, but I mean, it's scary. Look at Devontae Adams. Devontae Adams got the second most targets in the league last year, just barely was a wide receiver one, right? That's what happens when the targets aren't, when the quality of the targets aren't as good. If Devontae Adams got the same number of targets he got last year, but he got them from Patrick Mahomes, he probably would have had 2,000 yards, right? But because he got them from Jimmy Garoppolo and Aiden O'Connell, he was like wide receiver 9 or whatever he was. So just keep that in mind. The other one I'm not really drafting, and I've talked to about this like to depth on these channels, is Puka Nakua. And I think he's a great player. He seems like a really great guy. I just worry a lot of times with these type players that come out of nowhere and they have monster seasons with a guy across from them that is a stud. Is that what happens is every team last year, and just like us in fantasy football world and NFL world, we're slow to adapt a lot of times. We don't say, okay, Puka Nakua is the best guy on this team. You start saying, oh, wow, we got to start thinking about this guy. But every team that faced this team last year, they were thinking Cooper Cup's the best wide receiver on this team. We got to watch out for Cooper Cup. And yes, there were some games without Cooper Cup. In the games with Cooper Cup, Puka Nakua got 100 targets. Cooper Cup got 99. So kind of split, right? This year, now that everybody in the world believes that Puka Nakua is now better than Cooper Cup, some people might not believe that. Maybe me. But we think that they're just as good. Don't you think defense is going to adjust? Right? Don't you think the defenses, if you were a defensive coordinator, right, and you're going to play the Rams, do you put you and you have a shadow corner? Are you going to put him on Cooper Cup? Or are you going to put him on Puka Nakua? I mean, Puka Nakua goes in the first round of fantasy drafts. Cooper Cup goes in the fifth. I mean, what's the thought? Do NFL teams still believe Cooper Cup is better, and then Puka Nakua is still going to get the second man coverage? I've seen this a bunch of times. Juju Smith-Schuster comes out, has a monster season because he's next to Antonio Brown. Once Antonio Brown goes away and the coverage is focused on Juju, all of a sudden Juju's not that good. Chris Godwin, number 2 wide receiver in the league in fantasy football 1 year because everyone's watching Mike Evans. And next year they treat those guys kind of equally. And all of a sudden now Mike Evans is better than Chris Godwin again, right? I've seen it a ton of times. Calvin Ridley across from Julio Jones. Once Calvin Ridley was the top dog, wasn't that good. And then he got suspended. Everyone remembers him getting suspended. They forget him having 6 games where he was terrible in fantasy football after everyone thought he was going to be a super megastar. So for me, I just look at like people are drafting Puka Nakua over AJ Brown. AJ Brown just had back-to-back 1,500-yard seasons with the Eagles. Why would he not be good again? I don't understand why we got to try and reinvent the wheel all the time. When if Puka Nakua goes out and has a great year again this year, then I'll draft him at his ADP. But right now he's already being drafted as if he's the what? Wide receiver 6, 5. I mean, I'm just not really doing it. Another one that I'm not really doing in my big leagues is Marvin Harrison Jr. And for me, I think he's going to be good. I think he's going to be great. It's just a matter of why take on the risk. Again, with Puka Nakua and Marvin Harrison Jr., people have gotten over their skis a little bit where the risk is now kind of it's not even part of the equation anymore, right? Like it used to be that you would take a stab on rookie wide receivers, the best one off the board later on in the drafts, because everyone's like, oh, rookie wide receivers don't do anything. Now the expectation is that these guys are going to be amazing no matter what, right? And they're being drafted that way. So like Marvin Harrison, the idea used to be that you would wait and take a rookie and hope that he finishes top 10. Now he's being drafted top 10. He's being drafted at 9. So for him to outperform that ADP, he needs to finish top 5. And it's entirely possible. We like Kyler Murray, but there's also the possibility that he is a rookie and he needs to learn the playbook and that he doesn't have the tricks of the trade. And, some of these corners are giving him a hard time and there's nobody to take the help off him. I do worry a little bit that Marvin Harrison is being drafted at wide receiver 9 and he's, I think he's a top 15 wide receiver. But if I'm drafting a guy at wide receiver 9, I want him to have the upside of being wide receiver 1 overall, right? Like if I'm drafting guys in that range, I want guys that have that crazy upside. And maybe Marvin Harrison Jr. does. I'm definitely drafting in Dynasty, right? But like in redraft, you're not getting any sort of discount, right? So I'd rather wait. And again, people thought that some of these guys that were completely can't miss prospects. Well, they kind of missed a little bit. Corey Davis was picked like 4th overall. No, everybody liked Corey Davis. Sammy Watkins, right? N'Keal Harry. Like in hindsight, you look at it and you're like, oh, of course that guy sucks. Nobody thought Corey Davis was bad. Not one person, dude. Maybe Steve Smith, but Steve Smith didn't even say he was bad. He just said that he wasn't his number 1 wide receiver that year. Be careful. I think this guy's great. I think he's gonna be fine. There's too many good wide receivers. I don't feel the need to do it. The other thing that I'm not really doing is we got to talk about the Texans. They played yesterday. The guy I'm fading most from that team is Tank Dell. I have a whole video on that already, but the short and sweet is that he's a smaller player. They use a fullback. They were only going to be able to have 2 wide receivers on the field the entire time. I think those 2 guys are going to be Nico Collins and Stephon Diggs, and I'm not really drafting them either, right? But with Tank Dell, you get down to a jumbo goal line set and you're sending out a fullback and a blocking tight end. No chance they take a 6'4" Nico Collins off the field. No chance they take a veteran diva Stephon Diggs off the field. I think his upside is just capped. Maybe in best ball I'll take him. Not really doing it there. Also, not really taking Debo Samuel. I love Debo in like best ball, right? Because the whole thing is that he has that rushing upside. That one year he had a crazy season, but there was a lot of injuries to other players, a lot of things involved in that. For Debo, he needs those like random rushing touchdowns and rushing plays. And since they have CMC, they don't really need to do that all that much. And in redraft, where I'm setting a lineup, it's just so hard to predict. It's just not something you can really say, oh, today, because of the way the defense is, today is the day he's going to get an end around and take it 35 yards for a touchdown. It's just so hard to predict. That's why in best ball, I like it and I think his best ball ADP and that style of game has pushed up his ADP in redraft. Again, also that one crazy season he had where he's basically playing running back for this team. Uh, people think that that's going to happen again when it's probably not going to. Unless CMC gets hurt, then it could. From the elite guys that I still rank top 24, so all those guys I have top 24, I'm just not really taking an ADP. Next one will be DJ Moore. Just not taking a ton of DJ Moore. Um, I think he's a great player. I just think they have a lot of great players now. They have Keenan Allen. They have Roma Dunze. They have 2 capable tight ends. They have a couple backs that can catch passes, and they have a rookie quarterback. And uh, I have a hard time believing that the target consolidation we saw last year, when it was DJ Moore, Darnell Mooney, and Cole Kmet, that we're going to see the same target consolidation this year. And I get the argument of, oh, well, he was so good last year, and now they have Caleb Williams. If it was the same team as last year, with no Keenan Allen and no Noah Dunze and none of these other guys, and a better quarterback, then I would love it. Then we'd be all about it. But I just think that they're probably going to distribute the ball a little more. So not really going there. A few other guys I'm not taking a ton of. Christian Kirk to me, I like Christian Kirk. I had Christian Kirk in a lot of dynasty. I was backing them up when they signed him, but kind of a boring pick. Howard Bender loves it. Howard Bender also plays in a lot of very deep leagues. Like if you're in a league with like 3 wide receivers and 2 flexes, Christian Kirk's going to be in your lineup every week. I just find that his upside is a little boring, especially in half PPR. So I don't draft a lot of Christian Kirk. I'm not drafting Jordan Addison. For the same reason, if it's tough to draft Justin Jefferson, what the heck are you drafting Jordan Addison? You know what I mean? They have TJ Hawkinson, who seems to look pretty good. They got all these other guys, not really going there. Also, Jaden Reed, again, same thing. I would love for him to be an every down full-time player. I just think that it's probably going to be Christian Watson and Romeo Doubs on the outside there. I know some deeper guys, not drafting Roman Dunze. I think he's going to be the third fiddle, just like Jackson Smith and Jigba's been, even though I think JSN's a good player. He's been the third guy. Not drafting a lot of Jacoby Myers, not drafting Jahan Dotson, Quentin Johnson. I don't know who's drafting him. Dontavian Wicks, no. Khalil Shakir, I think he's a part-time player. Xavier Legette. Quick rundown there. So that's what's going on. And again, grab the Fantasy Alarm draft guide now, and all these guys are in there going all the way down. I mean, I go all the way down and say, okay, when you get to the 20th round, I'm willing to take Greg Dortch. I'm not really taking a lot of AT Perry. Like that's how deep these go. I'm not going to do that here. We'll be here for 5 hours, and we got a show tonight to do as well. So go check that out now. FantasyAlarm.com. And if you use promo code Let's Go, you can get 50% off the first month. That'll give you all the access to everything, all sports, the cheat sheet, the draft guide, you name it. Get in there, check it out. We got a question in the chat, so I'm gonna hit on that real quick, and then we'll hit on some running backs, hit on some tight ends, and get out of here. All right. Apologies for the sickness. Not my fault. All right. My Luke wants to know. I'm up next in the fourth round, going wide receiver. I've got Brees Hall, Kincaid, DK, Devonta Smith, Cooper, Pickens, Godwin, McLaurin. I'm at the 5 spot, so we'll likely go wide receiver again on the way back. Brees, Kincaid, DK. So for me, I mean, I got my rankings right in front of me. For me, the guy I have ranked highest of those guys is Cooper Cup. I like Cooper Cup or Devonta Smith. I also love Godwin. So if you can go wide receiver, I would grab Cooper Cup here, who could be incredible again. It was just the year before last. He had the best wide receiver season of all time playing with this same quarterback. So I think Cooper Cup is a very good player, dude. Great pick there. And then I love Godwin this year. So coming back, that's what I would do with that. I'm feeling all right, dude. I got the best medicine in the world and football. So we're talking ball. We just did the fades for quarterbacks and wide receivers. Let's look at running backs. Time to look at running back for fades. These are the ones that hurts people's feelings. And again, I'm not always right. So take this stuff with a grain of salt. If anything, I'm trying to help you with your thought process, right? Like with the quarterback stuff, when we talked about it, I'm fading this guy because this guy has similar upside and he's going later, right? We said that with CJ Stroud and Jordan Love. Same goes for running back at times as well. So let's dive in on the running backs here. Uh, again, just like the wide receivers, the guys going at the very top, got no problem with taking them at ADP. Christian McCaffrey, Brees Hall, Bijan Robinson. I like them all. And again, with the Bijan versus Brees Hall argument, you're splitting hairs. Full PPR, I love Brees Hall because of all the screen passes. Bijan, of course, he has super high upside, both passing and running. So can't go wrong there. Jonathan Taylor, Saquon Barkley, all those guys I like. Jahmyr Gibbs, I'm not drafting much of, but I wouldn't call him a straight fade. In full PPR, I mean, doesn't get any safer. And there's obviously upside if Dave Montgomery gets hurt, but, just know it's going to be frustrating at times because he is splitting a backfield with somebody else. The one guy that I'm not really ever drafting, and I know he was everybody's darling, and you see this with like Reddit and Twitter, who are hyper active. They get all the sleepers off waivers, right? They get all those guys. That there's 8 guys in your league that aren't plugged in Twitter. They're not watching this show right now on August 2nd because they don't care as much as we do. So they don't end up with the Puka Nakuas and the Kyron Williams. And those people are vocal and loud and angry. I mean, a lot of my friends, they're on Twitter. They never tweet. They never like anything. They never comment. They see every one of my tweets, but they just don't tweet, right? The people that are super active, that were adding guys like Kyron Williams, are going to be super willing to defend Kyron Williams. And for me personally, great ad last year. I just worry because I've seen time and time again a player in a very good situation who came from a later round and is not super athletic. They don't pop really in any way on paper, but the situation worked really well for them. I've seen teams go out and grab another guy, and then all of a sudden they look at it and they say, "Wow, okay, maybe this guy isn't that good. Maybe our offense is just good, and maybe we'll use them both, or maybe we'll use this guy instead." We've seen it so many times in the past just a few years, right? Everyone loved Tyler Algier. Awesome. 1,000 yards as a rookie. And then the team said, wow, that was really great. Let's go out and get a better running back. And they went and got Bijan Robinson, right? We saw with Michael Carter. People were fired up with Michael Carter with the Jets, and then they went and got Brees Hall. We saw it with James Robinson with the Jaguars. Like, how could he not be the guy? Well, it turns out that they went and got a better guy, Travis Etienne. Right? It happened with Damian Pierce. Everyone's all fired up about Damian Pierce, 4th-round pick. Turns out Devin Singletary is just a better running back. Even, it was a good offense. It was a good situation, right? I worry with Kyron Williams that they bring in Blake Corum, who scored 58 touchdowns in college, and they say, well, now we have two good running backs. So why would we use one good running back every play now that we have two? And maybe there is a situation where they do use Kyron Williams every single play, and Blake Corum is just a pure backup, and then Kyron Williams will be worth it. But that little bit of insecurity, like the teams that have Christian McCaffrey and Brees Hall and Bijan Robinson and Jonathan Taylor and Saquon Barkley and Travis Etienne, they didn't go out and draft one of the top running backs in the draft. They didn't do that, but the Rams just did. So I worry about that. I honestly do. Another guy I'm not really drafting an ADP in most of my leagues is Derrick Henry. Unbelievable player, incredible player, but virtually every format I play is PPR of some kind. If I was in a standard league, I would be drafting Derrick Henry at ADP in that league. I think this guy could lead the league in rushing yards. I just worry that he's never really caught passes in the past. And Lamar Jackson isn't really known for dumping the ball down because he's a mobile quarterback. And the coach just came out and said that Justice Hill, we consider him to be a starter as well. I think that means Justice Hill is going to be the pass down back. So with Derrick Henry, especially when you factor in age, I worry about it. It's going to be really fun to watch from an outsider that doesn't have Derrick Henry on his team. So that's where I'm looking at with him. The other one I'm worried about from the top group, and again, a lot of these guys, I'm cool with them at ADP, but I don't find myself drafting much James Cook. Now, part of that is because I do like guys like Pacheco and Alvin Kamara and Rashad White that all go in the same range. So part of that is that. The other is that James Cook, right? He was top 5 in yards from scrimmage, but he was like running back 16 in PPR points per game because they only use him in those open field between the number spaces, right? When they get down the red zone, Josh Allen scored 15 touchdowns. In fact, Latavius Murray scored 4. James Cook only had 2 rushing touchdowns, and that's by design. They've been trying to find that guy. They brought in Damian Harris. They brought in Leonard Fournette. They brought in Latavius Murray. Now they bring in Ray Davis, and we're hearing good things about Ray Davis. Now they've got what they want. They got Ray Davis as the short yardage back, and they have Josh Allen as the battering ram. And then they have James Cook operating in space. I'm sure he's going to be just fine. But in that range, I don't want just fine. I want massive upside. Alvin Kamara was on pace for 112 targets last year. He could easily be a top 5 or even the RB1 in PPR formats. With this new scheme with Clint Kubiak bringing in fullbacks and them drafting a left tackle in the first round, it's entirely possible. With James Cook, I just don't see. I'm like, why would James Cook score 15 touchdowns, 15 rushing touchdowns? I just don't see why they would do that when they have Josh Allen, they have Ray Davis. So I'm just not really drafting him there. I'm sorry. That's the theme of the show today. I'm sorry. You know what I mean? Like there's so many running backs, right? There's 32 teams. Every team in the modern era uses like 2, maybe 3 running backs. I'm not drafting James Cook. I'm sorry. Another one is a player that I've touted, a player that I think is really good. A player that has been in the league 3 years, and all 3 years he has 1,000 yards rushing. You would think that would be a guy we like, but Najee Harris, I just don't like the way they deploy him, right? They're clearly using Jalen Warren on the pass downs. They want to use 2 backs, and it's just so hard for me to look at a team like that and say, I want the running back that's going to be the goal line back for that team. If I'm going to do that in that range, I'm going to draft David Montgomery, right? Because like the Lions are awesome. The Lions are getting down the goal line all the time. Jamal Williams scored 17 touchdowns in 17 games, not because he's awesome, but because he's on the Lions. Last year, you take out the game where David Montgomery got hurt, he scored 13 touchdowns in 13 games. I'm doing that. If you truly think the Steelers are going to be on a Lions level offense, then take Najee Harris. And, with this Geno Smith getting banged up stuff, I'm not really taking Kenneth Walker, but if I'm going to take if it's Kenneth Walker, David Montgomery, and Najee Harris on the board, I'm taking Kenneth Walker or David Montgomery. And that's usually the decision that has to be made at that part. It's not really taking a lot of Najee Harris. Also not taking DeAndre Swift. Never been a big DeAndre Swift fan. I don't like to predict injuries, but if you're going to predict them for DeAndre Swift. And, I think that Khalil Herbert and Roshan Johnson are going to mix in more than you think. It's also a rookie-led offense, and I'm not sure that line's even that great. I think that team's going to be throwing a lot of passes. So don't really love Swift there. Definitely not drafting Brian Robinson Jr. We've got a mobile quarterback, right, that runs it himself, doesn't dump it down. That's what we've seen from mobile quarterbacks all the time. They also brought in Austin Eckler. And if you don't think Austin Eckler is going to play, you got to understand how football works on the sidelines and in these meetings and with these coaches. The head coach doesn't decide who's on the field. The offensive coordinator doesn't decide who's on the field. The offensive coordinator does not have time to walk around the sideline and say, and you get in there for this play. No, the position coaches do that. The line coach picks the lineman. The wide receiver coach sends in the different packages. The running back coach sends in the different packages. And the running back coach for the Chargers is Anthony Lynn, who was not the Chargers, the Commanders. The running back coach for the Commanders is Anthony Lynn. The head coach for the Chargers when Austin Eckler was there. And Austin Eckler already came out and said, we're going to do the same thing we did under Anthony Lynn when it was me and Melvin Gordon. That means that Austin Eckler is going to get that pass work. He's going to get touches in space in red zone. So with Brian Robinson Jr., what you're getting is an early down back on a team that has one of the best pass catching backs in the league, that has a rookie mobile quarterback. In what world is that appealing? I don't get it. I don't get it. Do not get the Brian Robinson thing. Very good story. This the gunshot thing and all that. It's a very cool story. But for fantasy football, I mean, that sounds terrible, right? So miss me with that. We just wait until they get down the red zone and Jaden Daniels does the RPO. He takes it himself and scores. The very few times they get down the red zone because that offense isn't supposed to be that good. So be very careful there. Other than that, some later names I'm not really taking a lot of. Jaleel McLaughlin's gotten steamed up a lot, but I think Javonte Williams kind of locked into that gig, so I don't know if I really love that. Trey Benson, not hearing great things about Trey. I think James Conner's the guy, and Trey Benson's the backup. So I don't really love taking guys that don't have standalone value. I'm not really drafting Jerome Ford. I don't think he's that good. Marshawn Lloyd, as of late, has been overdrafted, I feel. I'm not even sure he's the RB2. The coach just brought up that he was like, Marshawn Lloyd's playing special teams, and it's like Josh Jacobs is the man. They paid him a ton of money. I like Josh Jacobs a lot. And then he also mentioned, he's like, oh, we have Jacobs and A.J. Dillon. I was like, Jacobs and A.J. Dillon? Shouldn't it be Jacobs and Lloyd? Somebody's got to ask them about that. Where are the beat reporters? Where are the beat reporters ask? Like, I wish I could just send in some questions. You know what? Ask this question for me. Who is the top tight end? Who's running with the ones? When the Texans send a fullback on the field, who's coming out of the game? Ask the questions for us, please. Beat writers, what's going on? Ask about A.J. Dillon over Marshawn Lloyd. Just ask, right? Another one was being drafted really high, and his ADP is still high despite a lot of bad stuff coming out, is Kendre Miller, right? Injured. He's injury prone. They said they were talking about, if he can't get healthy, he might not even make the team. Like, just give me Kamara. Malai Luke wants to know, with the Foreman injury, do you see a path for Ford? Ford is not statistically a good player. That's the problem you run into. Even last year, when he was like kind of forced into that offense, and they were running like 80 plays a game, he was just fine. What I don't want, I mean, I guess if you went out, all right, let's say this hypothetically, it's August 27th, and you have to draft your fantasy team that day, and Donta Foreman's not back in practice yet, even though he went to the hospital yesterday and he was back in practice today. So Donta Foreman's back there. He's back. I'm not sure if he's practicing, but he's at the facility. Like, he's already back. But let's say Donta Foreman's out and Nick Chubb is not going to play for the first couple of weeks, and you draft a 0 RB team and you have no one to start yet by like the whatever round he's going, and you need someone to plug in as like your RB2 for like 2 weeks, then maybe draft Jerome Ford. But like, what's your plan with Jerome Ford? Like, you're building a team to win a fantasy championship. Jerome Ford's going to do what for you? Like, is he going to be in your starting lineup in the playoffs in fantasy football? Almost certainly not. Unless Nick Chubb gets hurt again, right? Like, unless he gets traded. Maybe they use Jerome Ford early in the season and trade him to another team. I just don't see what the utility of Jerome Ford is. But in that situation that I painted there, where it's like Chubb and Donta Foreman are out and you need somebody for like a couple weeks, or you want to play DFS, yeah, go ahead. Go crazy with Jerome Ford. I'm not drafting a lot of Elijah Mitchell. I'm not drafting a lot of Ray Davis. Ray Davis, is getting a lot of steam here all of a sudden. And, the problem is if Ray Davis was on a team like the Lions and with a quarterback that has no interest whatsoever in running ever in Jared Goff, then yes, we're in, right? Because he gets all those touchdowns. Whatever goal line touchdowns they have, pass interference in the end zone, touchdown, Ray Davis, right? But they have Josh Allen. So that takes those touchdowns and cuts them in half. I don't, if I'm going to draft a pure touchdown dependent guy, I need him to be the touchdown guy. Like Ray Davis as the second option in the red zone and the second option at on first downs, not appealing. So sorry. Again, that's the theme of the show. Sorry. Not drafting Damian Pierce. Guy can't pass block, man. That's why he lost the job to Devin Singletary. That's why they brought in Joe Mixon. That's why I really brought in Cam Akers. He's a kick returner. Khalil Herbert, Roshan Johnson, not really drafting either. But if I had to pick one between I'm not drafting Swift. If I had to pick one of those three guys, it'd be Roshan. So if so facto, fading Khalil Herbert. Then not really drafting Tank Bigsby. But that's about it. Let's wrap it up with some tight end action here. So that's the running backs. Question in the chat before we get to that. Do you like JMO to bounce back in his ADP in line? Jamison Williams, it's overused, the excuse, in fact, to say he's better in best ball or he's a best ball only guy. But Jamison Williams, as a guy that, he has like a couple plays that are all 40 plus yard touchdowns. He has a 40 plus yard rush for a touchdown, but he's not consistent week to week. And they have target hog Amon-Ra St. Brown, 164 targets. Sam Laporta got 120 targets. The two running backs, Gibbs and David Montgomery, likely will combine for 100 targets. If those two guys don't combine for 100 targets, Jahmyr Gibbs was overdrafted, being drafted at the back end of the first round of your fantasy football draft, right? Because like David Montgomery is going to get 20 or 30. So if Gibbs isn't getting 70 or 80, then you overdrafted him where you picked him. So that's what we're predicting. I just don't see how Jamison Williams can get that many targets. You have to, and again, Lions fans don't like to hear it, but to bump Jamison Williams up for fantasy, you have to take away from Amon-Ra St. Brown and Sam Laporta. If Amon-Ra St. Brown gets 140 targets and Laporta gets 100, that's 40 targets you can take away from them. That's still only like 80 targets or whatever, Tough situation for them all to be consistent at once, and again, that defense is going to be better and the running game is going to be better. So I'm not even sure they're going to be throwing as much as they did last year. Be very careful with that. But anyway, Jameson Williams, best ball only for me. But I do love him in best ball. I will say that. Tight ends, let's do it. Fading tight ends. And again, this year, so easy to draft tight end this year. I broke it all down last week of how the yin and yang strategy works. All those rankings are up. The articles are all up. Get the draft guide. The yin and yang tight end strategies up in the draft guide now, breaking down everything, every level, the elite guys, the mid guys, everything. 20,000 words, actually. It's 20,000 words between the four articles. So check that all out. But the top guys, we kind of like all of them, right? Like there are probably 6 or 7 guys between Andrews, Kelsey, Kincaid, Laporta, McBride, Pitts, Ingram. Like any of these guys could be the tight end one in fantasy. If one wide receiver gets hurt for the 49ers, now George Kittle could be the tight end one, right? There's so many guys that could be the tight end one that my philosophy on who to fade is that I'm not same thing with quarterback. I'm not taking the first one off the board. So unfortunately, I'm not drafting a lot of Sam Laporta. Sam Laporta was the tight end one last year, right? And he had the best rookie tight end season of all time. Those are all accolades that are nice, right? But you got to remember that having the best rookie tight end season of all time, and even just being the tight end one in any given season, doesn't mean that season was like legendary. If you take the last the last decade, and sort them by fantasy points per game, Sam Laporta's season was actually 29th, right? Like Mark Andrews a couple years when he was a tight end one, that season was top 5 of all time, right? This season wasn't top 5 of the last decade. It wasn't top 10 of the last decade. It wasn't top 15. It wasn't top 20. It wasn't top 25. It was 29. It was just barely top 30 over the last decade. So in any given year, the Sam Laporta season last year wouldn't have been a tight end one. In fact, if you take points per game, Travis Kelce had higher points per game. TJ Hawkinson had higher points per game. Mark Andrews, if you exclude the game where he only played 11 snaps, he had higher points per game. So I don't feel the need to go out and draft that guy as a tight end one. And people say, oh, well, he was a rookie, so now he'll be better this year. Oh, he'll be better, or he'll be just as good. He'll be the same. Or maybe they'll throw a little less and he'll be worse. Or maybe Jameson Williams will play more and he'll be a little worse. Or Jameer Gibbs will get more targets. Like everyone drafting Jameer Gibbs as high as they are obviously expecting more targets for Jameer Gibbs, right? So maybe he'll be a little worse. Or I don't know, maybe Amon-Ra St. Brown continues to get 150, 60 targets and he doesn't take a step forward. So I'm just not drafting him at one. If somebody else takes Kelsey and then Laporta slides, then I'll take Laporta, but that never happens. I don't really find myself taking Kelsey either. I find myself waiting a couple rounds later and taking like Mark Andrews and Kincaid and all those guys. We're not going to give away all the company's secrets here. You got to get yourself a copy of the Fantasy Alarm Draft Guide now if you want to know exactly who we're taking and how we're winning all these leagues and how we're doing yin and yang tight ends. But today I'm giving you the fades. I'm giving you a little bit of the strategy here, which is that I'm not really taking the top dollars because I think there's enough good players floating around. All right. So from the top area, I'm just not taking the first tight end. If so facto, that means I might not get Kelsey or Sam Laporta. Boo hoo. I did draft Travis Kelsey for the first time like ever because I usually never take the first tight end. Felt pretty good as the tight end like 3 off the board. Someone else took Dalton Kincaid ahead of him and Laporta. So I was like, okay, I'll just take the greatest fantasy football tight end of all time in the same situation that he's always been in. After a year where he led the league in fantasy points per game, I'll do that. So all right, that was fine. But usually those guys go a little too high for me. Another guy I'm fading, but this one breaks my heart, breaks my sweet little heart, dude, because I love this guy. I think we all love this guy, right? Everybody loves George Kittle. Everybody loves George Kittle. He's the man. If I had to pick a tight end to have a beer with, I would pick Rob Gronkowski. But if I had to pick an active tight end to have a beer with, I would pick George Kittle, right? Guy seems super cool, got the wrestling moves and the wrestling belt and all that. Here's the problem. When everyone's healthy on that team, he is insanely inconsistent, incredibly inconsistent. Last year, they played 19 games, including playoffs. When everyone was healthy, Kittle only had 3 games with more than 3 targets. Of all the games they had, right? Of all those 19 games, in 12 of those games, he had 3 or fewer catches, right? When guys were hurt, he was awesome, right? He had the one game against the Cowboys where he caught 3 passes and scored 3 touchdowns. That was a massive chunk of his fantasy. In the games where basically he had 7 games where he had 7 or more targets. In 6 of those games, they were missing one of Debo, Ayuk, or Juwan Jennings. His best games were the games where Debo and Ayuk were hurt. So if Brandon Ayuk gets traded today or tomorrow or any time before the start of the season, George Kittle wheels up. The problem is that he's crazy inconsistent. He is a good best ball tight end, but you got to go and look at his game log, man. Like in between these games where he has 150 yards or he has 3 touchdowns, he'll have a game with 1 catch for 7 yards, 1 catch for 9 yards. And in a lot of those games, it's not because he's bad, it's because they just have too many weapons. Like you will go into these games where they're facing the Cardinals defense and it's not even a matter of like, oh, everyone's going to do good because this team's good. It's a matter of Christian McCaffrey goes and scores 3 touchdowns. So George Kittle has 1 catch. Christian McCaffrey scored 4 touchdowns, I think, in one of the games last year versus the Cardinals, right? Kyle Shanahan even said, somebody asked him, like, what's going on with George Kittle? He goes, nothing. George Kittle's fine. Some of these games he has to block so that other guys can run routes. He's one of the only tight ends, the only active tight end in the league that has a season where he blocked on over 15% of the pass plays and he still finished top 5. It's just so rare. It's not a good spot. So I'm not drafting George Kittle. I just like Ingram and Pitts in that range better. I'm not drafting Jake Ferguson a lot. He's very boring. He's very slow. He ran a 4.840, 4.81. Over the last 7 years, no tight end no tight end that ran a 4.8 or slower has multiple 40-plus yard plays. One is the max. Jake Ferguson has one 40-yard play. It was exactly 40 yards because he's slow, right? That's why George Kittle is fast. George Kittle ran a 4.52. Kyle Pitts ran like a 4.49, right? Those 2 guys, like George Kittle last year, 65 receptions. He has 1,026 yards. Jake Ferguson had 71 receptions. He had 760 yards, right? Kyle Pitts as a rookie had like 60 receptions and he had over 1,000 yards. He's just slower. He's boring. I know he could be a top 2 target on the team, so he's safe. If you want to do a little yin yang with Jake Ferguson, then go out and draft a second tight end that has upside. That's fine. And the ADP actually kind of works for it. But the big mistake I see is people go out and they draft Jake Ferguson and they say, I got my tight end. I don't need to think about tight end ever again. That's a mistake because you get to the fantasy football playoffs and everybody has good wide receivers and running backs. But the real difference maker are the guys that have the good quarterback, that have the good tight end, that have the good defense. And if you go in with a guy like Jake Ferguson, boring, then you're just not giving yourself a chance at upside. So if you draft Jake Ferguson, which is fine if you get a good price on him, circle back and grab a second tight end on your bench with upside. I'm begging you. Another guy we're not drafting, Dallas Goddard. Mm, you know, Dallas Goddard is like, in the what's that movie Role Models when he's like, "Do you like Coca-Cola?" And he goes, "I like the idea of it more than I like it." That's Dallas Goddard. Like we like the idea of Dallas Goddard, but he's never finished higher than what, tight end 7, right? This guy's been hurt 5 years in a row. He is not a red zone target over the last 3 years, right? This guy has 7 total end zone targets. Donald Parham Jr. got 7 end zone targets last season, right? And why would you throw it up to, for grabs to this big goon when you can just run the tush push, right? That's the thing. Other teams, when they get in that area, are like looking for their bigger players. And they're like, let's figure out how to get this guy the ball. That team doesn't do that. That team says, we have a play that's unstoppable. Let's just score the touchdown and get this done with. So that's part of the game, man. That's part of the game. So just don't like that. And yeah, Gator J pointing out that he said that a receiver uh, with George Kittle, like he knows his job, man. He doesn't need to be the star. He's already a star. He's already super cool. Like he doesn't care about that. He cares about winning the Super Bowl, which they haven't done yet, but could be this year. So yeah, not drafting Dallas Goddard. Dallas Goddard, he's a handcuff, right? Like if AJ Brown or Devonta Smith gets hurt, now we move him up in our rankings. But do you want to have a handcuff plus in your lineup and just wondering if someone's going to get hurt? Not to mention, he's the one that always gets hurt. So I'm not playing that game. I'm not drafting David Njoku, but I will advise this. If you don't think Jerry Judy is any good, if you think Jerry Judy is just garbage, then draft David Njoku. I think that Elijah Moore got roughly 100 targets last year, and Elijah Moore was terrible. I think they traded for Jerry Judy for a reason. I think Jerry Judy could be the second target behind Amari Cooper. If you think Jerry Judy is just awful, then keep drafting David Njoku. That's just it for me. Like David Njoku could easily be a top 2 target on the team. That's just not how I see it. I think Judy might be the guy. Not to mention, I will sneak this in there that when Deshaun Watson was playing, David Njoku was getting like 5 targets a game. When the backups were playing, he was getting over 7 targets a game. They were firing the ball at Njoku, and the backups, Deshaun Watson really wasn't. Deshaun Watson's back. Also, I'll throw in one last one here. I'm trying to very softly fade David Njoku because we like him. I know Howard Bender. Howard's fading him this year too with me, to be honest, even though he's always touted him. Alex Van Pelt, the offensive coordinator, called the second most tight end screens in the league last year behind only Doug Peterson and the Jaguars. And David Njoku got 20 of those. Alex Van Pelt is gone, baby. He's in New England. Well, that guy's not New England anymore, but you get the idea. He's in New England with the Patriots, which is nice for Hunter Henry. I know we're doing fades in this one, but just saying. So not drafting him. Not drafting TJ Hawkinson. I don't care how many reports say that his knee looks really, really good, really cool. Like, that's not even the biggest problem. The biggest problem is Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison. That's always been the biggest problem. Very rare do we have 3 guys on the same team all get 100 plus targets, which is, that's what we need. And Kirk Cousins isn't walking through that door. So you got a guy who's the third fiddle on the team, right? And he's coming off a serious knee injury. So he hasn't had the time to really work with Sam Darnold and JJ McCarthy. No, I don't see the appeal. I don't know what's going to happen to maybe if Jordan Addison got traded or if he got suspended for the entire year. I don't know, but not really doing it. Good player though. Hold on to him in Dynasty. Dalton Schultz, fade him, dude. What are we doing? Who are the people out there drafting Dalton Schultz? And I'll throw Cole Kmet in the same category because I've just absolutely dogged on Cole Kmet this offseason. So I think they're good players, but we need these guys to be a top 2 target on the team. Last year, every top 12 tight end in PPR was a top 2 target on the team. When you sit down and you make the list of who is going to lead the Texans in targets, how many players do you get through before you get to Dalton Schultz? Even if you put Tank Dell 1, then you're going to have who next? Stephon Diggs and then Nico Collins. I mean, it's those 3 at the top. He's 4th at best. I mean, you just what is how many injuries away from upside is he? Right? Same with Cole Kmet. They got a Dunze, they have Keenan Allen, they have DJ Moore. They also are going to rotate him with Gerald Everett. How many injuries away are these guys from being top guys? Noah Fant, right? Noah Fant is going to have a better season than he had last year, but is he going to be fantasy relevant? I don't think so. I'm not really drafting him. Other guys, I'm not really drafting Chig Okonkwo, depending on how this DeAndre Hopkins thing goes. The Hopkins injury, if it's serious and it lingers, maybe. But for now, not doing it. Maybe DFS week 1 if Hopkins is out. Tyler Conklin, I just personally think that the top targets on the team are Garrett Wilson and Brees Hall, right? And then you have Tyler Conklin going up against Mike Williams. I'd probably pick Mike Williams there. Conklin is not fast. He doesn't really break tackles. He'll have random touchdowns because of Aaron Rodgers, but I don't want random touchdowns. I want consistency. Uh, After that, not drafting Tyler Higbee, not drafting Daniel Bellinger. Also, might surprise you. The last one here, I'm not drafting Isaiah Likely much unless I have Mark Andrews because I don't think Isaiah Likely is going to have much standalone value because they have Mark Andrews, they have Zay Flowers. It's likely versus Rashad Bateman for kind of a low upside third target position on the team. Don't like it. If Mark Andrews gets hurt, boom, Isaiah Likely going directly into our lineups. But if as long as he's healthy, we're not doing it. So there you go, man. That's the fades for today. I said I was going to do a half hour, so obviously we did a full hour. But who cares though? It's football time. So do yourself a favor. If you want all this information color coded with the guys we're drafting above ADP, the green guys, our favorites, right? Here's a quick peek at what it looks like last year. It looks a lot better in the draft guide. It's all cleaned up. They do a good job. This is my like low tech version of it, right? That was last year, right? You get the green guys, the upside guys that we're drafting above ADP. The yellow guys are guys we consider around ADP, and the red guys we talked about today. Get them off your board. Get them out. We don't need those guys. All right. So thank you guys for tuning in. If you want to get that now, get a copy of the draft guide. The best way to do it, honestly, is until before this goes away because it will, and then you can just buy a copy of the draft guide at full price. That's what people are going to have to do in August, the casuals. But if you go there now, fantasyalarm.com/win, use promo code Let's Go, you get 50% off your first month of a full membership. And it's cheaper than the draft guide. It comes with the draft guide, the cheat sheet, everything. And you get access to everything behind our paywall. You get all the sports. You get into our Discord, right? You can check everything out over the next month. And then if you want to keep it during the season for all the advice, for all the DFS, for hanging out, all the memes, all the Discord, all that fun stuff, then do that because that's awesome. Like we're hanging out. And if you just want it for this draft season, it's cheaper than the draft guide itself. So go over fantasyalarm.com/win. Use promo code Let's Go. You'll be set up with that. I will be back tonight, not on YouTube, but on Sirius XM channel 87 from 6 to 8 p.m. with Howard Bender. We'll be talking ball. All right. Thank you guys for tuning in.